Detective Claire Donovan had seen a lot in her years on the force. Violent crimes, unsolved murders, cases that made even seasoned officers lose sleep. But the case of Samuel Hawthorne, a man who vanished without a trace, was different. It wasn't just about the missing person, it was the eerie circumstances surrounding his disappearance that kept gnawing at her. It all started one stormy evening in late November. Hawthorne, a well-respected professor of history, had called his wife, Laura, around 7 p.m, saying he was about to leave his office and head home. His drive was a short one, no more than 15 minutes through the quiet suburban streets, yet Samuel never made it home. Laura, worried sick after hours of no word from him, called the police. The next morning, Claire was assigned to the case. She arrived at the Hawthorne residence, a modest but charming home in the sleepy town of Ashwood, and sat with Laura in their living room. Laura, a petite woman with soft features, was pale, her eyes red from a sleepless night of worry. "Samuel always comes straight home," Laura said, her voice trembling. "He never deviates from his routine. Something's happened, I know it." Claire nodded, scribbling notes in her worn leather notebook. "We're doing everything we can to find him, Mrs. Hawthorne. Did he mention anything strange recently? Any unusual behavior? Maybe a disagreement with a colleague?" Laura shook her head. "No, nothing. He was normal. We talked about dinner, the weekend plans, nothing out of the ordinary." Claire assured her they would leave no stone unturned, but deep down she knew this case felt off. A man doesn't just disappear into thin air. As she drove to Samuel's office at Ashwood University, she thought over the facts. Samuel was last seen by colleagues around 6:30 p.m, locking up his office. His car was still in the university parking lot, but there were no signs of a struggle, no suspicious activity on security footage, nothing to indicate he'd been taken or attacked. Upon arriving at the university, Claire spoke with his colleagues and students. All of them described Samuel as a brilliant but unassuming man, with no known enemies or troubled relationships. His office, when Claire inspected it, was tidy except for a small stack of old books on his desk, volumes of obscure history and folklore. As Claire flipped through the pages of one particularly worn book, a note fell out, written in Samuel's neat handwriting, "The one who sees will vanish." It was cryptic, strange even, and it didn't seem like something a professor of history would write. She carefully bagged the note as evidence and left, her mind spinning with possibilities. What could it mean? Was Samuel involved in something beyond his academic life? Back at the station, Claire dug deeper into Samuel's recent work. It turned out that he had been researching a series of local legends about disappearances in Ashwood, dating back hundreds of years. According to the old tales, every few decades, someone would vanish under mysterious circumstances, leaving no trace. Some people believed the disappearances were linked to the dense, fog-covered woods on the outskirts of town, a place whispered about in old folklore but rarely visited. Intrigued, Claire decided to visit the woods the next morning. They were dense, nearly impenetrable in some places, and locals referred to them as the Vanishing Woods because of the old tales. Armed with her flashlight and a creeping sense of dread, Claire ventured into the forest, following a path that had nearly grown over with weeds and moss. As she walked deeper into the woods, a heavy fog began to roll in, muffling the sounds of the forest around her. She felt uneasy, as if the trees themselves were watching her. The deeper she went, the more the fog thickened until she could barely see a few feet in front of her, and then she saw it. Something etched into the bark of an ancient oak tree. A symbol. It was a perfect match for one of the illustrations in the old books Samuel had been studying, a strange rune that appeared in connection with the disappearances. Suddenly, the air around her grew colder, and Claire's skin prickled with an almost supernatural awareness. Something was wrong. She turned to leave, but just as she started retracing her steps, she heard a soft whisper, barely audible above the rustling of the trees. "Claire," she froze. It was impossible. No one knew she was here, and the voice, faint and distant, sounded like Samuel. "Claire, help me." Her heart pounded as she swung the flashlight around, searching the shadows for any sign of him. The fog swirled, thick and oppressive, as the voice grew louder. Claire's instincts screamed for her to run, to get out of the woods, but the detective in her pushed forward. She had to find him. Following the sound of the voice, Claire moved deeper into the woods, her pulse racing with every step. The fog seemed to close in around her, making it difficult to breathe. The whispering grew more insistent, more frantic. "Help me, I'm trapped." Suddenly she stumbled upon an old abandoned clearing. At its center was a stone circle, ancient and worn by time. In the middle of the circle lay Samuel's coat, neatly folded, as if he had left it there deliberately. Claire approached the coat cautiously, the whispers now swirling in the air like a storm. She knelt down, reaching for the coat when the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. The fog twisted, and for a brief moment she saw something, a figure, tall and shadowy, standing just beyond the circle, watching her. She blinked, and it was gone. The whispers stopped. Claire's heart raced as she scanned the woods, but the figure had vanished. She grabbed Samuel's coat and ran, her feet barely touching the ground as she sprinted back to her car. Back at the station, Claire examined the coat, finding nothing unusual in its pockets, but there was something strange. A faint, earthy smell clung to the fabric, like damp soil mixed with an old, rotting scent. It made her stomach churn. She called a forensics team to analyze it, and they found traces of something unexpected. Human remains, decades old, were embedded in the fibers. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. The lab technician handed her a final piece of evidence, Samuel's wedding ring. It wasn't just strange that they found his ring, it was impossible. The forensics report confirmed that the ring had been buried deep within the coat's fabric, yet it showed no signs of wear. It was pristine, untouched by the elements, as if it had been placed there recently or by something that wasn't bound by the laws of nature. Claire's mind spun. What had she really encountered in the woods, and what was that figure? Later that night, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching her, something that had followed her back from the woods. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling when her phone buzzed with a text. It was from Laura Hawthorne, Samuel's wife. "Did you find anything?" Claire hesitated before replying. She couldn't explain the truth, not without sounding insane. Instead, she simply responded, "Still investigating, we'll find him." But as she placed the phone down, a soft whisper filled the air, chilling her to the bone. "Claire?" Her breath caught in her throat. She turned her head slowly toward the window where a faint shadow lingered just beyond the glass. It was tall, impossibly thin, with dark, hollow eyes that seemed to see straight through her. The whisper came again, low and malevolent. "The one who sees will vanish." Claire blinked, her heart pounding in her chest. When she looked again, the figure was gone, but deep down, she knew, just like Samuel, her time was running out.